The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of NAMI New Hampshire or the organization's funders. All individuals and personal experiences are different. Please connect with your primary care provider or a mental health professional to seek advice regarding any condition you may experience. NAMI New Hampshire does not endorse or advise specific treatments. For 24/7 crisis help, contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 or text NAMI to the crisis text line at 741-741 or call 911.
It's time we talked about it. I'm getting tired of living without it. The things in my life just don't make any sense. Each day I wake in the morning, but every day just feels so boring. I don't understand just what I need to change. It's up to you to want to do the things you want to do. And though it's temporary, feeling sad can be so scary. I love the ones who understand me. I never want to feel so angry. I never want to feel like this again.
Welcome to the 603 Stories Podcast, a monthly mental health podcast made by young adults for young adults, where we share stories, make connections, and find hope. Any ads throughout this podcast are not associated with 603 Stories or the 603 Stories Podcast. There will be sensitive subjects discussed during this podcast. Should you need them, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 1-800-273-8255, or you can text the crisis text line by texting 741-741.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to 603 Stories, a mental health podcast made by young adults for young adults. I'm Jace. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'll be one of your co-hosts today.
I'm Heather. My pronouns are she and they, and I'm your other co-host on this podcast. Just as a reminder before we get started, Jace and I are not mental health professionals. We're just two young folks who are passionate about mental health and sharing these conversations with you.
Today, we will be joined by Corey, who will be sharing his experience with autism and deafness. We will share some statistics, get a glimpse into Corey's lived experience, and talk about the importance of support and advocacy.
But to start, let's meet our guest for today's episode. Corey, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Corey Burrell. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm 26 years old, and I'm deaf and with a hearing aid and cochlear implant, and I'm also autistic as well. And my favorite hobbies are, or interest, my favorite interest and hobbies are heritage railroads. I love Star Wars and Star Trek. I love being outdoors, camping, going to the White Mountains, snowboarding, and I love going to antique shops as well. And my dream is to one day work for the railroad and eventually becoming a certified railroad engineer for the heritage railroads.
Oh,
Very nice.
that's really cool.
Thank you.
I would love to visit sometime once you're a railroad engineer or specialist, whatever you said it was.
Yeah.
We can do a 603 special.
Sounds good. So, like I said before, to begin this episode, we are going to start by sharing some statistics about autism spectrum disorder and also about individuals who are impacted by deafness. In 2017, New Hampshire had just under 24,000 residents ages 18 to 84 living with autism spectrum disorder, which is approximately 2.22% of the population.
In 2015, New Hampshire reported having just under 2,600 individuals ages 3 to 21 living with autism spectrum disorder.
And around 17% of children ages 3 to 17 years old will be diagnosed with some sort of developmental disability like autism, ADHD, blindness, and cerebral palsy. In the training and or certification standards for New Hampshire educators and other professionals, there is currently no requirement concerning knowledge or competencies in autism spectrum disorder. And special education, early interventions, and self-advocacy are the most important tools for autistic people to thrive.
About 75% of adults with autism are not employed. In 2018, about 85% of college graduates with autism were not employed.
And as of December 2019, approximately 736,900 cochlear implants have been implanted worldwide. In the United States, roughly 118,000 devices have been implanted in adults, and around 65,000 have been implanted in children. So with that being said, Corey, would you mind giving our listeners a brief overview of what a cochlear implant is so those who don't know can kind of be on the same page as all of us?
Yeah, sure, no problem. I'd be happy to explain what a cochlear implant is. So a cochlear implant is basically sort of like it's a hearing device that attaches to my head, and it produces sound in a digital manner. I guess if you want to call it that, and I don't hear through my ears exactly, though I sort of do. What it does, the cochlear implant projects electronic or electrode through the cochlea in my ear, and it compensates for the damage, like a hair follicle or whatever, that would enable sound to go through my ear and just compensate for that, and it enables me to hear digitally, through the cochlear implant or through my cochlear implant.
Wow.
Mhm.
How old were you when you received your cochlear implant? And is there a specific age that it's generally implanted?
So I was implanted at around the age of 11 or 12 or something like that. I know it's definitely, one of those two age range, but typically, I think there are babies with cochlear implant, but most, when I went to here in New Hampshire, which is basically a school for the oral deaf and hard of hearing, a preschool kindergarten for the deaf and hard of hearing. And basically, I saw kids, around, that age range that wore cochlear implants. So you can be implanted at pretty much a young age, but I wasn't implanted until I was like 11 or 12 years old.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Okay. I have more questions.
Did you have any hearing before you got the cochlear implant, or is it just something that magnifies the hearing that you already have?
So that's another good question. So I did have hearing. Well, I didn't know, I didn't have hearing before. So my hearing on my left ear is severe to profound. I still wear a hearing aid on that ear. So I still have some hearing left, but the only way that I would hear if I were to use earbuds or something like that, to like listen to music. But if you were like to speak with me without or speak to me without my hearing aid, I wouldn't be able to hear at all. And that goes with the cochlear implant also, which I before I was implanted in my right ear when I was 11 or 12 years old, I had the hearing aid. And for someone that, profoundly deaf on the right ear, although the hearing aid was okay, my hearing was so severe on that ear that I qualified for the cochlear implant, and it helped me significantly better compared to using a hearing aid, I guess. Of
Thank you for sharing that.
course.
What led to you either seeking out or getting an autism diagnosis? I was reading when I was trying to find the statistics earlier that most individuals with autism are diagnosed when they're in elementary school. And it's very rare for people older to be diagnosed with autism because We learn those coping mechanisms, we learn those skills on how to hide it and to compensate for social cues and things like that. So, did you seek out the autism diagnosis, or was that something that surprised you?
So I was diagnosed when I was in, high school. I My parents noticed that I was having a hard time socializing with kids, my peers at school. Basically, I was afraid, to socialize with my peers because of bullying, and which I went through a lot. And I also had, social differences that, my peers would notice. And my parents were concerned about that. And so they just decided to reach out to, other specialists, because I was already going to counseling at the time for just issues at school and, dealing with anxiety, adjustment disorder and depression. And, they wanted to, because of also having, some conflict with kids at school, just my family was, just concerned about that as well. And because of that, that, what led them to decide to reach out to other, specialists who might, understand how my issues work, or, just basically that, I guess. And that's when they found out that, because they took in, what I was going through at school and what was going on at the time. And that's how the professionals figure out that, I had autism. And I didn't really take that very well at first. It was what I did was I kept hiding behind the fact that, that I'm deaf, and that me being deaf is the only reason why I struggle, so much with my peers. And my fear was that if, I started admitting to others about, that I had autism, that it would, open the door for, for me to be bullied even further, because, I was really, really vulnerable with my peers. And, I was easily sucked in, and, and I got hurt so many times.
I'm interested to hear more about your experience at school. Now, I know you were just mentioning your process with an IEP in high
Mhm,
school, and having support from folks within school. Do you
mhm.
feel like you received an adequate amount of help at school? Like your
So that, yeah,
accommodations were being met?
that's a good question. The issue when I was at school was, being understood by my peers and my teachers, my classmates, them not, understanding my behaviors and my struggles. And again, autism is not just a developmental issue, it's also a neurological condition as well. There are just some things that, are difficult for me, that because, autism is a neurological condition as well as a developmental condition, as, I stated. Mhm.
So, Corey, you mentioned some challenges that you have experienced.
Mhm.
What are some things that helped ease those challenges for you when you were in school?
So, I remember when I was, in school, I especially in elementary school, I had one of my speech pathologists I was really, really close with. She really, really loved baseball, and I love baseball as well. And she was a huge Red Sox fan. And what I always remembered about her is that, she was very, very compassionate. She always spoke to me in a gentle manner. And I really, really appreciated that. And it was, I never, when I was in school, I never had that. I was constantly, chastised and bullied by my peers, especially my teacher. And, my speech pathologist, she, always spoke to me in a very, very gentle manner. And I remember, there's been times when, or there's been a time when, I got into a communication breakdown with one of my teachers. And I told my speech pathologist about it, and she was very, very compassionate on, assuming what, my teacher's perspective might have been. And she even said that, she would defend me, and, explaining to, you know, my teacher, my side of the story and how she felt about the situation. And because, she, defended me like that, it, I, saved myself from getting, unjustly, you know, getting unjustly reprimanded by the principal's office. And that would happen to me a lot when I was little, and I would just get, unjustly reprimanded for stuff that, wasn't my fault, or, something that I couldn't help. And I have to say that, I owe so much to that speech pathologist. And, she would really, really, because we related so well, she was, much like a sister figure to me. And I kind of have to say that I kind of really miss, how well she treated me. And I never got that much when I was in school.
And you
Mhm,
mentioned interacting with older folks, and like one of the things my brain went to was generally when you're employed and you have
mhm,
management or someone that you're working under, there
mhm,
is a significant age gap.
right.
Um, so two-part question.
Mm.
So have you had any struggles in the process of gaining employment, maintaining employment? Have there been specific generations or bosses or roles that have been more understanding and accommodating?
So my experience or my experiences with employment has been a bit difficult for me. In the past, believe it or not, I dealt with coworkers making fun of my deaf accent or the way how I talk. I had to deal with supervisor being so unwilling to learn how to communicate and work with someone like myself that has hearing loss. And I've been chastised for trying to help supervisors, coworkers, and just people in general, to understand, trying to help them understand how my disabilities actually work. And it's very demoralizing and exhausting to have to go through that. And I've gone through that all of my life. And all I ever wanted was to be understood and, be treated equally and, have the same equal social opportunities as other people, and not just, be a part of, those not just with disabilities, but without disabilities as well. And it just saddens me that, we that people like myself are just, you know, sort of, not intentionally, but seemingly like we're just, forced to be a part of just one, crowd of people. And that's just really, really unfair for us, because we want to be friends with those without disabilities as well. Especially when it comes to working for the railroad, which is really what I want to do with my life. I really want to, like I said earlier, I want to work for the railroad and, one day become a railroad engineer or work my way towards being a railroad engineman, especially for the Heritage Railroad, because my passion is vintage railroad equipment. But what many railroad workers don't understand is that I can hear just fine with my devices. I can even hear on the radio as well. And matter of fact, I have my own scanner that I listen to, different, repeaters or railroads as well, including EMT, etc. And I find listening to that stuff to be fascinating. But what railroad workers don't seem to understand is that, my hearing devices work almost like glasses, I guess. It's just basically that. Although I admit that, hearing devices like the cochlear implant and the hearing aid don't work well for everyone. But in this case, it has been proven and demonstrated that it has worked well for me. Um, I love railroad workers. I absolutely respect them. I think many of them are great people. One of my friend, is a railroad engineer herself, and yes, she's a female railroad engineer, which is really, really cool. And find her very, very inspirational. Very tough person. But what many railroad workers don't know is that, um, railroad regulations, you know, permit that crew can use hearing devices. And, I wish that, the railroad or railroad workers would understand that there is a way to work with those like myself without it becoming a liability for them. And, again, I respect railroad workers to the fullest extent. They, work their butt off, almost 24/7. But yeah, that's pretty much my experiences with employment and, what I'm looking to do in life. And I just want, others to know that, my disability, there's a way to work with somebody with, who has hearing loss, that's deaf, hard of hearing, and those, with autism as well. I mean, in a way that again wouldn't be a burden on the employer or, in this case, the railroad. And I just think that, especially in that line of business, there's a little bit of a stigma toward, those who are deaf, hard of hearing, and those with autism.
We are hitting our time a little
Mhm.
bit. We're reaching our end,
Mhm.
unfortunately. So
Right.
to reflect on some positive notes, because we are all about our growth, celebrating positivity.
Hmm.
What are some of the things that have been helpful for your mental wellness over the years?
Just acknowledgement, I guess, saying, Corey, yes, I understand your issues, and I'll try to, be more accommodating and work with you in a way that, is receptive and where you would understand. Because social cues are a struggle for me, and I admit that, all I ever wanted was, somebody that I could really, really connect with, that, it isn't judgmental and have patience towards my difficulties. And I think that's really, really important. And another thing I want to mention too, growing up, I was very, very close with my older sister. She was like literally the only best friend that I had, someone that, was very understanding of my challenges and difficulties, especially my social differences as well. I connect with, especially people that I can feel like I connect with on a, sort of older sister and brotherly type connection. And I've always felt that, um, especially the older generation, like my sister's age, she's around like 37, 38 years old. And she's a healthcare worker, by the way. And I've always felt that generation has always had the ability to understand my struggle so much more. And that kind of connection has always been important for me to, sort of associate myself with.
Nice. Well, my final question for you tonight is if you had one message for our listeners, what would you want them to walk away with today?
Um, yeah, that's a very good question. I really would like those adults with autism that, it's okay that, to have a childlike personality or a younger type mentality. It Don't be afraid of that. I have that as well, and it's something that I have, have embraced, that others might not understand that. I think that it's very important that sort of mentality is really, really okay, and that it's okay to be different from others, and that, I just don't be afraid that, to tell others about how your autism or how deafness works for you. It's all right to raise awareness and self-advocacy as well, and just don't let others, chastise you for explaining how your challenges and disability works. I truly believe that's wrong, and nobody should ever do that. And I just love the fact that, that each one should be able to express, how they feel or how they think freely. And I think that's just really, really important.
Well, thank you so much, Corey. I
Mhm.
have appreciated everything you've had to say. I've learned so much over this conversation.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm really grateful for how you talked about the importance of patience and communication, because I think a lot of us forget that in our day-to-day lives.
Mhm.
Our society is so go, 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 and so busy that we forget
Right.
to slow down and keep in mind that other people may have different social, emotional, or even physical capacities as
Mhm.
us. And it's okay to have those differences. In fact, it's wonderful because it's what makes us all so diverse and unique. And we need to have more patience with the people around us, no matter
Right.
what they're going through.
Right.
Absolutely. And not only does doing that help the individual succeed and grow and thrive, but it really creates opportunities for your relationship with them and others to succeed and grow and thrive. That little extra work of advocating and communicating makes the world of difference over time. Now, before we close out, is there any takeaways you would like to share?
I guess my biggest takeaway from the conversation was definitely the patience and the compassion for others, and being willing to make the first step and get to know other people, because it can be hard to go up to people and start a conversation and make a new friend. But if someone doesn't do it, then it might never happen and you might miss out on a really, really great friendship. And so
Mm-hmm.
I guess for me, my takeaway from this is take that first step if you can and welcome people in and be that patient, understanding, and welcoming person, because
Right.
everyone deserves to have a friend.
I'm going to take a second to reflect on myself as an individual. I have ADHD, I have a lot of anxiety, and I am very frequently the person who kind of sits to the side and doesn't engage. And though
Mm-hmm.
in my personal and professional life, I
Mm-hmm.
work really hard to communicate and meet folks where they're at, I think I can really take some time and do some work on branching out and connecting with folks, and also just making sure I'm, being aware of my surroundings and people around me, and making sure that people's needs are being met, whether it's, seeing something negative on social media and interfering, or at work or in my personal life if I'm out and about.
Mm-hmm.
I guess a big part of it's just giving myself opportunities to be an advocate outside of 603 stories.
So, with that, we're coming to a close. Thank you, Corey, for joining us today. You were so wonderful to have on the podcast, and I learned so much. We really appreciate your vulnerability with us today, and good luck with your future endeavors.
Thank you. It's so much. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to come on and discuss my story, and I truly do appreciate you guys having me.
And always, thank you to our listeners. Your engagement with this podcast gives us the ability to continue sharing stories like these from our community. If you like today's episode, consider sharing it on social media. And if you're interested in more 603 Stories content, go ahead and visit us at 603stories.org or Instagram by searching at 603 Stories.
Thanks for listening to the 603 Stories podcast, a monthly podcast made by young adults for young adults. You can check out 603 Stories on Facebook or Instagram, or at our website, 603stories.org. Just a reminder, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline can be reached at 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-TALK. And the crisis text line can be reached by texting to 741-741. Remember, you can make connections, get help, and find hope through 603 Stories.